But my opening rant today at HartmannReport.com is titled, "Is Deporting a Journalist the Ultimate Form of Cancel Culture?" And it's about these two guys who are filling in on or have taken over or whatever. I don't watch it, but the Charlie Kirk show. And they're going on off about Mehdi Hasan. And one of them says, yeah, he's just a repulsive creature. We gave him citizenship for some stupid reason. Now, Mehdi Hasan was born in England and came to the United States. He said, we gave him citizenship for some stupid reason, and he rewards us by dumping on an American icon and an American hero. Now, what Mehdi Hasan had said that had outraged these guys is that these giant Nazi-style banners that are hanging from at the Department of Justice, it's a Hitler-style banner of Donald Trump with his head about 40 feet tall. Over at the Department of Labor, there's another one of Trump. And over the Department of Education, there's one of now Charlie Kirk. And so Mehdi Hasan, who's been on this program, he's a good guy, he's a very smart guy, says, I will support any Democratic candidate for president who says the first thing he's going to do is tear down all these banners. These, Nazi-style banners. Well, not just Nazi-style. Saddam Hussein had one, banners like this too. Fidel Castro had banners like this too. This is a dictator kind of thing. And so anyhow, he goes on. He says, you know what? I'll give my primary support to whoever says we're going to try to find a way to strip this person's citizenship and send him back to some dump. And then the other guy says, yeah, we should. We actually should. He's a foreigner. And for some stupid reason in our stupid immigration system, he was allowed in. Then he's allowed to come in here and smear the memory of Charlie Kirk, the legacy of Charlie Kirk. And listen, those are the freedoms that have been bestowed upon him by a superior country and culture to his own. So now they're saying the United States has a superior culture and is a superior country to Great Britain. I like the United States. Up until Trump became president, I'd rather live here than in Great Britain. But I think that what they're really talking about is the fact that he's Muslim. And again, in fact, they say, and yeah, whatever, he's British or whatever it is, but he's a Muslim. And so, yeah, we have a superior culture than Mehdi Hasan's, and he's going to come here and he's bestowed the same freedoms that American citizens have long enjoyed. That's because he's an American citizen. And by the way, those rights and freedoms are guaranteed to everybody in the United States, even though we're not respecting them right now. The Fourth Amendment says you can't kick in somebody's door without a warrant. You can't arrest somebody without good cause. The Fifth Amendment says, essentially the same thing. You can't, you can't deprive anybody of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Just pretty straightforward stuff. And, this is like cancel culture on steroids. Dan Sisson and I wrote about this in our book, The American Revolution of 1800, about how when in the election of 1800, it was Vice President Thomas Jefferson versus President John Adams running for president. And the newspapers at the time, particularly the anti-Federalist newspapers, or the Federalist newspapers, excuse me, were just ripping Jefferson a new one. Now, the reason they were able to do this without much pushback was because President Adams, had shut down the 30 largest newspapers that were calling him out, the anti-Federalist newspapers, what today we would call the Democratic newspapers. Back then it was Democratic-Republican Party. They dropped the word Republican, but this was the party that Jefferson started. And Adams not only shut down the papers, but he threw their publishers, editors, and in some cases their writers in prison. And so basically the only papers out there were the pro-Adams Federalist, conservative newspapers. They were the only ones that were left in this election. And nonetheless, when Jefferson was asked how he felt about it, if he thought that if he became president, he should clamp down on the pro-Adams newspapers, for example, his response was, if I had to choose between having a government with no newspapers or newspapers with no government, I would surely choose the latter. And he actually went on. He said, I am persuaded myself that the good sense of the people will always be found to be the best army. They may be led astray for a moment, but will soon correct themselves. The people are the only censors of their governors. And even their errors will tend to keep these to the true principles of their institution. To punish these errors too severely would be to suppress the only safeguard of the public liberty. In other words, don't go after the newspapers. He said the way to prevent these regular interpositions of the people is to give them full information of their affairs through the channel of the public papers, the newspapers, and to contrive that those papers should penetrate the whole mass of the people. And then he finally says, the basis of our government being the opinion of the people, the very first subject should be to keep that right, or object should be to keep that right. And were it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. So, you know, here we have this. I tell the story of when I was 16 and I was in high school. I was publishing this underground anti-war newspaper called The Jurist, and I got kicked out of school for it, which, you know, wasn't a terrible thing for me because starting in second grade, I'd been in all these advanced courses as a result of Sputnik going up. So I just, you know, moved right into college. But, you know, kicking people out of school, trying to deport people, trying to strip people of their citizenship because they said something you don't like or they wrote something you don't like is just fundamentally un-American. And now we've got, you know, these right-wing snowflakes. It shouldn't surprise us, by the way. The basis of right-wing ideology, I mean, going all the way back to Aristotle, the basis of right-wing ideology has basically always been fear, hate, tribalism, xenophobia. I mean, you know, John Adams was the master of this stuff, for example, and authoritarianism. So it shouldn't surprise us, but I think it should horrify us, particularly given the state of our media today and, you know, what the Ellison family and other right-wing billionaires are now doing to our media. This is something that we should all be paying attention to. We should all be concerned about. And we should all, you know, frankly, be pushing back on and supporting independent media.